I'm going to ask the people that have not yet had an opportunity to give their points of view and as to how we can contribute, Southeast Asia can contribute towards development and capacity building in Africa. So without further ado, I think I'm going to start on my right hand. Mr. Navin Ravindran, if you would be so kind as to provide us with a few ideas from your side as to how your organization has been adding value and how the sector can make a contribution.
Respected panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Before I answer the question direct, I just need to take a step back on to address the fundamental issue of trade. One of the most important aspects in trade that's been forgotten is something what we call as the focus on creating empowerment. And that comes basically over a period of time when you have trade that basically creates unutilized resources in a country. What I mean to say is that you always have unutilized resources prevailing in a country. And if those resources are not utilized efficiently for local demand creation and employment, international trade doesn't work. That's a fundamental issue that international trade is basically having to face today. Why am I addressing this issue? It's primarily because that's a challenge that we all have whenever we are sitting across the ocean trying to address Africa as a market for us. Most of the companies have looked at opportunities in Africa with a goal of what's there for me, rather than trying to address the issue as what's there for us. Once you are able to identify what's there for us, I mean, it's a long-term goal which will give you benefits. Companies who've been able to identify that has been able to sustain itself and develop a business model around it. Companies who've not been able to do that have not been able to survive in this environment. Coming specific, trying to answer the question, I will look at it from the Singapore perspective, since the audience over here will be more interested in trying to understand from the Singaporean way. When we sit over here and try to address this issue, that is it relevant for us to be in Africa? Yes, very much, because there's a lot of opportunity. Are we relevant for Africa? To a large extent, no, because as we have seen, the panel members mentioned, there are too many capacity builders already there in Africa doing their job. The question is, how do we then make ourselves relevant in this whole concept? And that's where the challenge comes as for us to integrate on not you. If you basically look at business, it's basically what we need to do and how we need to do. A lot of focus generally goes on trying to identify what needs to be done, forgetting the soft issue, which is how it needs to be done. And that's where we've been trying to focus our energies on. And one of the learnings that we have had is that you need to integrate. You need to integrate in the market. Maybe in the long haul it pays off, sometimes it may not pay off. But the only way that you can actually make a difference to your business is when you integrate on the cultural issue, people to people issues on a daily basis. And that's, I think, is the way that we need to look at while approaching Africa.
Thank you very much, Naveen. Mike, from your side?
I think Crimson Logic is an IT company specializing in providing e-government solution. And for Africa-wise, I think the digital Africa is very real. I think many countries, many leaders in Africa have seen technology as a means for them to be connected to the world, both from an economy point of view and also from a social front. And from the ICT industry point of view, I think Africa have tremendous opportunity. One of the main reasons is that the average age of the population is very young, and they are very adaptable to new technology. The only biggest constraint that they have is the availability of the financial means. At the same time, also the current development of the infrastructure. But nevertheless, it is very interesting, that many of the African youngs today have managed able to adopt ICT very well. And I have a very interesting experience. I mean, I was having a golf game in Nigeria, and one of my caddy was telling me that he knows about Singapore because he actually do online shopping on Singapore portal, and he bought his laptop there. And what propels them to actually look at using technology? I think the main thing is that currently, in terms of goods and services availability in Africa, is very much constrained to established businesses that have been operating there. And many of them actually have put a very high profit, and suddenly the whole availability of such services is very limited, to the population. With technology, today we are able to connect very well. They can easily get on the internet and procure many of these services, which will have cost a lot less than what they will have afford in Africa itself through the traditional means. And at the same time, I think the population are getting more well educated. There's a very strong desire to excel within the continent itself. They want to build a better Africa. They want to develop the country. So I think bundling with the young population and also the strong desire, we believe that these are one of the areas that Southeast Asia can potentially look at in terms of contributing to Africa. As in terms of technology adoption, I would say we are doing pretty well in Southeast Asia itself, as compared to maybe even some developed countries.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to give you a brief response. I want to go back to Naveen. You're sitting in an industry that is, I think, capital intensive from an infrastructure perspective, putting up the business. If there were young people here, entrepreneurs, smaller, micro, medium entrepreneurs, sorry, you cannot hear? Okay, I will try and talk within. Is this better? If you had to give young entrepreneurs advice, young, maybe not 20 years old, but 25, 30, 35 years old, interested in moving into Africa, what advice from your perspective, from your sector, would you give to such an entrepreneur?
Just to give a background about our company, we are basically the part of the Chandaria group. The group has been in Africa for a little over 50 years, and Aluzink Asia is primarily a 10-year-old trading company. We primarily represent factories across the Asian region, across Africa, South Africa, Middle East, and South America. What we do basically is that we go to the manufacturers and buy their location. And we buy their location, and in the process go over there and try to make a business model for them. How does it help them? Basically, what we do is that we are creating the value for the supplier, if I can use the word, by taking the risk away from them. I mean, I give the payment out from over here in Singapore. What do we do in terms of an value addition for the customer? We are basically saying that all the risk belongs to us. I mean, if you walk into China and look across 500 steel factories or 5,000 steel factories, where do you buy the quality that you want? Because you basically get the quality for the price you pay. And that's a long stretch activity. I mean, so if you are an entrepreneur, you need to have the inquisitiveness to identify an opportunity. That's one. Second, the most important aspect is you need to walk the talk. I mean, you need to go into the market, walk the streets in Lagos, walk the streets in Accra, walk the streets in Luanda, try to identify the cultural aspect. The reason because I emphasize so much on culture is because that's one differentiating factor that we have learned over the years that can make a good business model really solid or a good business model stumble over the years. To illustrate this point, what we did is we are primarily into the steel market. We identified the construction business in Africa as an opportunity for us. We further segmented the construction opportunity and identified housing as an opportunity. And then we went into the market trying to look into companies who were in the housing segment. In the process, we learned, which took a little over 2 years for us to identify that roofing was one segment that was not addressed very well. And that costed us a lot of money. I mean, in the sense, we are talking about a 2-year period where, you basically go and try and identify a segment that you need to focus on. What we saw was that there was this traditional thatched roof, made of grass and mud walls across Africa. And we also found that there were shanties which were having metal roofs. How do we then come in and play a value-added role? Metal roofs, I mean, as we heard the panelists say a few minutes back, the climatic conditions in Africa and Singapore are more or less the same. So imagine a situation where you are in Niger, or for example in Mali, where the temperature can go as high as 47 degrees and you are living in a thatched roof made of metal. The whole thing just boils in. So we identified a product from Japan that could basically play a role in terms of cooling down the temperature when the people live in this house. They were making it a little bit more attractive for them. The challenge was how to make a product out of Japan, which is perceived to be an expensive country, viable in Africa. Surprising enough, what we found was that customers were willing to pay as long as it made sense. Customers were willing to pay as long as it made sense for them in a way that it benefited the guy who's basically buying the product. We basically created wealth generation for our customers over there. And in the process, the customers went about promoting our product in the retail segment. So here is a case where we did not have to go the full stretch of trying to build up a distribution, but we just went about identifying those importers who were interested in creating the wealth. And once we had the model in place, we today have a segment in the roofing sheet metal market, metal roofing sheets, where you have most of the products coming out of India, or for that matter even from China, but you still have customers who are asking for this product which comes out of Japan. And we are talking about businesses which is sustainable. We are talking about businesses which has given us good returns to the stakeholders. So identifying the opportunities is one aspect, but walking across and taking the long road with no shortcuts through Google is something which I would say that you need to keep in mind, especially when you're starting out. Be optimistic, because optimism is a force multiplier and it always helps.
Thank you, Navin. Mike, before I gave over to Mr. Luite, I know of entrepreneurs in the field of IT in this audience. You're an IT expert. What advice do you have for them? How do they open up a business, an avenue in this wonderful continent called Africa? What do they look at? What do they stay away from?
I can't really say I'm an expert, but I think the opportunity, while is there, is going to experience exponential growth. But the important thing, as what Navin have said, we really need to integrate. And I think today, the traditional type of IT business, I think, is something that is really well established. Of course, it might not have reached the kind of standard that we have in Singapore or in Southeast Asia. I think what we probably the more better opportunity is really on innovative solution. Of course, Singaporean, we had a very well established environment here in Singapore. And we tend to think that many of this country, is going to operate like Singapore. But I mean, as part of our experience in Africa, we start to realize that maybe some of the technology that we think that it can well integrate in Singapore might not work there. I can give you some example. In the case of currently, we are doing a project in Rwanda, and we have taken it for granted that everybody will have a smartphone. And the kind of app that we wanted to build was just a mobile app that you can use it on a smartphone. But when we reached there, we realized that yes, there are many phone owners. The telco industry is actually well established there, but most of the people do not have a smartphone. Actually, in Singapore or Southeast Asia, we actually we took a huge step, and we've forgotten things like SMS and USSD code. And in countries like Africa, this becomes the very familiar way of them consuming service. And we, as a Singapore company, we had to start learning some of that technology. So this is kind of intricacy that you need to try to go in and understand. And also, and don't have too much assumption that you bring with you from Singapore. You have to discover the ground, listen to the people. And I also agree with Navin that you really have to integrate on the social and the cultural aspect of things. And I think Southeast Asia, as what we have earlier the speaker had mentioned, we are not known to them in a very natural way, and a lot of times they actually want to hear from us what value proposition do you bring into Africa than simply what you can provide us. So as for Crimson Logic, what we have done, not only we went in, we engaged in the contract. One of the areas that we look at is to how we can actually contribute back to the society. So in Rwanda itself, we know that they have an ambition to become an ICT, to create an ICT industry. As one of the programs that we have done is to set up what we call Rwanda Technology Associate Program. Basically, what we do is that we actually employ graduates at their market rate or even higher than the market rate. We provide them with the actual technical training, but the bulk of the 1 year program is actually on-the-job training, where we actually put them through different disciplines of the project itself, giving them real-life experience. And this is actually very well received, by the country itself, because we are not there just to write a code, deploy the system, and trying to make money from it. We are investing in developing their young people, sharing with them how things can be done in an enterprise manner, and I think this is where you have a lot of opportunity in that aspect as well. I think lastly, the one of the area that you have to look at is maybe all the cloud infrastructure technology. I think the traditional hardware business, that is really very well established. All the big boys have their own distribution network, and I think with the ability of cloud, you don't really need to depend on such a distribution network anymore. Basically, you can write your application and deploy on the cloud, and the users are very familiar. So I think the cost of investment is low. I think the important thing is really find innovative solutions that meet the African needs and not what we think that it work for us and we think that it will just apply for them.
Thank you very much, Mike. Mr. Tay, Africa, when you look at it, Africa is urbanizing, growing middle class, infrastructure problems, a big need. And even when we have planned city development, we have the problem of work jobs in cities. How can Southeast Asia and Singapore specifically make a contribution?
Before I answer that, perhaps some background of Sabana Jurong. Last year, the government decided to merge Sabana and Jurong International together. Who are we? Sabana is the party responsible for all the major design of the housing estates in Singapore, 1 million homes, the urban built environment. Sabana is the party responsible for Singapore's success story in housing. Jurong, on the other hand, are the people responsible for our massive success story, industrialization. So when you put the two together, the government has effectively created the biggest consultancy powerhouse in Asia. And we are still growing, about 4,000 strong. The target is maybe to be 6,000 to 8,000 strong very, very soon. Right? Now, Africa itself. Our experience in Africa started back in 2003. It's a very strange place, right? You cannot expect standards of Singapore to be applied to Africa. Right? The first day you go in there, you have a bit of a cultural shock. But we have adapted. Now, mind you, as consultants, when we go to Africa, people look at us. They don't see Sabana Jurong there first. They see Singapore. The Singapore name is very strong in Africa. Most of our clients in Africa, I would say 90% are governments. And that is where we think we have the biggest impact to shape the way the governments there think. I'm very happy to see our friend, Ambassador from Rwanda. You can ask him what our projects have done for his country. Basically, the Singapore name is synonymous with high standards of integrity. when I enter Africa, when we walk into Africa, we are not going there just to design one building. We go there and try to shape the economic policy thinking of the government by giving to them a long-term sustainable blueprint for economic growth. And that is articulated through a proper sustainable master plan. The master plan dictates how land is to be used, and all your businesses cannot run if there is no land, if there is no proper plan for what the land is to be used for. And this is important because when we plan the cities, we give a very high level of transparency. And as an investor, whether you are a big fund, you are a small startup company, before you invest in a country, you want transparency. You want to know what's going on there. And this is what we do. We plan. And we provide that transparency to our plans. And the plans are then adopted by the government and hopefully they enforce it. Not every government that we have worked with can see through those plans that we create for them effectively. I think we're very happy that Rwanda has done a very good job and a lot of investments are flowing in. And our association with the government doesn't stop there because increasingly we see that with the execution of the plans, we may have to come in and help hold the hands of the government where the execution of the downstream projects are concerned. I think it's something that we had not been paying close attention to in the past, but now there is a strong need to do that. And not an issue because many funds have approached us. And these are very huge funds with billions of dollars to invest. The first question asked is, what can I invest in? And as part of the master plan that we create, we have identified catalytic downstream projects that the government need to implement. And this is one area that, although Singapore is very small, Singapore does not have all the solutions and answers to Africa. But Africa likes us. Why? In one short summary, third world to first world, one generation. And who told me that? Governor Fashola himself, the former governor of Lagos. I recall I was invited by the Commonwealth Business Council in Britain to a talk in Lagos. And my topic was sustainable development. And after my talk, expected, the Nigerians are very vocal. The Nigerian business community raised their hands and asked me, what makes you think that the Singapore model would work in Nigeria? But I never said the Singapore model has to be copied. I said, you study the Singapore model, and then where you can adapt, you take those things that are good, that can fit into your country, and you hybridize it. Now, before I could answer my question, Fashola stood up and told me to sit down. He went up to the rostrum, and he looked at his countrymen, and he made a very interesting comment. He said that London is successful today because London had hundreds of years of history to make mistakes. Paris also, the same thing. They had hundreds of years to make mistakes. But for Fashola, he had been studying Singapore when he was a kid, when he went to university. For Fashola, Singapore moved from third world to first world and is in his lifetime. And that's what excites him. Right? And so, when we meet many governments and leaders, we have questions thrown at us. If Singapore can do it, third world to first world in 40 years, can we do it also? But in a far shorter time. Our answer is always a very diplomatic answer. We say, Excellency, if you look at your country, you have far more land, you have far more people, you have gold, oil, gas, everything you want. We have nothing. If we can do it, so can you. But there's something that you must have, and that's good leadership. So the key in Africa, in many parts of Africa, that is preventing, from the perspective of a consultant, that is preventing Africa from realizing its full potentials with all its wealth, is the lack of good leadership. Some people prefer to define it as benevolent dictatorship. We look at it, dictatorship, not so right word to use. Better call it good leadership. In the case of Rwanda, Call it what, benevolent dictatorship, but Paul Kagame is doing a good job. And the way I, also from a consultant's perspective, Africa is tribal in nature. And tribal societies respect power and authority. So if you get a good man up there who has good intentions for the country and he can lead and is very firm, the country can move forward. And so this is our challenge, right? How can the Singapore business community work with us? I've told our ministers many, many times that after we set the master plan, we have all the information at our fingertips, where the developments are going to come, where is the so-called new future Orchard Road coming, where are all the industrial hubs. Some people are smart. The Japanese are smart. Mitsui came to see us when we were doing the Rwanda master plan, courtesy of the embassy. Embassy directed them to speak to us. And I was very amused why Mitsui was so interested in talking to us. And later when they came to see us, they told us that we are going to buy land in Kigali. We want to build a new dry port facility. We have to know what your planners are thinking. Because with one stroke of the pen, maybe the land that they have bought that was supposed to be a dry hub may be converted into a residential area, and then the investment goes up in smoke. Right? So that's the kind of transparency that is needed. I think Singapore companies will do well in Africa. This is the time that you have to be in Africa. Again, from the wise words of our Prime Minister at the last Africa-Asia Forum in Indonesia, even the Prime Minister, the government leadership in Singapore admits that there are sweet spots in Africa. The trick is to identify where the sweet spots are. But he ended by also commenting that we do not know enough of Africa. And so the dialogue continues. We think we have a part to play through our massive planning works. We're doing a lot of work. Recently we just secured one huge project. Imagine a Singapore company is now planning half of Ghana, 1/3 the size of Japan. Right? No tenders. Our jobs, no tenders. Everything is given to us because there is a trust that we can do the job now. Imagine planning half of Ghana or more than that, and the information flow in our hands is there. And the Ghanaian government is looking for us also to help us to have them open the doors. And indeed, we are going to do that. We have already approached investors, logistics, whether they are French, Swedish, Japanese, whatever, right? Whatever makes sense. Even Singapore companies, right? If you think that you have the stomach to go there, when the plan, before even the plan is completed, roughly you know what you must do because you have a first mover advantage. So these are the things that we can do in a way to help Africa. Singapore is a very small country. Our resources are limited. Population, talent also pool is also limited. But by going in this way, I think we leave an indelible mark on the country, And I think we have done that for your country. I was in Guinea, the last country to be declared Ebola free in December. We went in. And my purpose there was to meet His Excellency Professor Alpha, the President of Guinea, and his entire cabinet. Your president was there, Excellency Paul Kagame, together with your boss, Foreign Minister Lucy. I met her at the hotel lobby. We stayed in the same hotel. The first thing she did was pull me aside and said, "You must help these people." Words from the foreign minister, and obviously a very satisfied government that Singapore has, in a way, helped you to move on. And they see the value of how our works have transformed their economy. And they also wish their friends in Guinea well. And hopefully we can also do a good job in Guinea, as we have done in Rwanda. And I'm sure as we move on, we have many friends in governments all over Africa that have tasted our food, our dishes, and are happy with it. So this is how we can contribute. And I can end by saying that if any of you out there who are interested in doing business in Africa, of course, If you're in infrastructure business, come and talk to us. If you want to build a new logistics hub, come and talk to us. If you want to set up a farm, see Olam, don't go and talk to me, right? They know their farming business better than us, right? If you want to set up a shop, like do trading, you see our friends from at the end of the table, right? And IT, of course, Mike and his company. But again, the master plans that we create help to bring all this together, help make sense to the whole entire equation. Because at the end of the day, I'm sure everyone in this room, at this table, agrees that transparency is very important. And also coming with that, good corporate governance. That is something more challenging for us to rub on to African governments because it's not easy to change entire culture, right? And we are not there to change entire culture. We are just trying to influence certain things here and there, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. Ladies, before I open the floor for questions, I would like to acknowledge the High Commissioner of South Africa. Ma'am, thank you for joining with us. Sorry I didn't see you at the back. And also the Charge d'Affaires from Zimbabwe, Mr. Nyema. Thank you very much for attending. We appreciate your support. As a matter of fact, we appreciate the support from all the High Commissioners from Africa. Right, ladies and gentlemen, whilst you think about questions, I would like to sort of start off. Ranveer, you made the point that there were 4 hubs in Africa that you were looking at: Mauritius, South Africa, Kenya, and Morocco. However, you did not mention Nigeria. Nigeria provides us with the largest economy in Africa. I'm sitting there with a president that I think is doing all the strategic things. Is there any specific reason why you did not mention Nigeria, or is it just no specific reason?
Thank you, Johan, for asking me that. And you're very right. I should have mentioned Nigeria especially also. However, I don't see Nigeria as a hub. Nigeria is a very large and a very important and a dynamic market in itself. While how Mauritius, Morocco, South Africa, and Kenya are positioning themselves are more as regional entry points, regional financial hubs, regional policy hubs. So that's the reason. I should have also mentioned Nigeria not only because Olam started there, but we have actually a Singapore lady who has been there for more than 10 years in Onisha and running a business on her own. And we highly regard her in the SBF community for the business she has built for herself and the confidence she gives to the community here that while everybody talks about Nigeria as being a complex market to get into, that lady and her family have been running the business on their own spirit for all these years.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, any questions from the floor? People that have a question that they would like to ask any of the panel members?
Morning, everyone. My name is David Ang. I'm from the Singapore, Human Capital Singapore. I'd like to touch on the point from Mr. Louis Tay. The company and some of you on the table have done a lot to help develop the African country. Now, speaking from a very selfish perspective for Singapore, how would you think we can encourage our SME to write on your success, to go out to these countries and to create an opportunity and business for themselves? How can we, in the perspective of internationalization, as one of the future economy of Singapore, how can we, on the back of the giants and experienced people like yourself, bring the SME along? Because Singapore is a very small market. Our domestic market is very small. And the growth for the SME is really to follow, for example, Sabana, who has master plan and the intimate knowledge of the township. Perhaps you can help identify the SME with the relevance, competency, and capability, to go out with you and with some of the other entrepreneurs as well. I think in that way we can help Singapore, again from a very selfish perspective, help ourselves to help others. Thank you very much.
That's a loaded question, you know. We have 100,000 SMEs, maybe 120,000 SMEs in Singapore. The island itself is getting a bit too crowded, but definitely have to go overseas. The government is trying its best to help SMEs along. I think recently in the budget announcements, there are a lot of goodies that have been thrown out to help SMEs automate and get more professional. But that aside, of course, there are many competing arenas for SMEs to choose from. Right? For many SMEs, offered the choice between opening up a business nearby in Southeast Asia or even in China, traditional markets. The risk is there, but they understand again. Southeast Asia and China, or even India for that matter. But Africa, for many SMEs, continues to be very mysterious. Right? And added on to the risk there, it's not easy for even people like us to pull the SME along. Right? Like I said earlier, of course, we go in, we set the master plan, everything is very clear. Right? I think it's going to be a challenge for us. Right? And we are not in the business of, also for selfish motive also. Huh? We don't have time to sit down and keep on talking to the SMEs to nurture them. But having said that, there are some bright sparks there. We have been approached by some of these SMEs who clearly have a value proposition they can make in Africa. And we are talking to them. We introduce them to certain parties in the African continent that we know of, which we think would fit into their business criteria. Right? And then we let the two sides move along on their own. Right? We can't babysit them. Right? So really the challenge for the SME is one of that of a big mindset change. If you walk into Africa, just like you walk into the Middle East, and if you expect to make money in the first year, forget it. You study how companies like Tolerem did it. Tolerem people were telling me that when they started and by the way, they were not the SME at that time, but how they entered Nigeria was this, that they had a joint venture with Anthony Salim and they brought Indomie. When they first entered Nigeria, Havish Aswani, who is running the outfit there in Lagos, was telling me, he said, people were commenting, stupid Indians, right? They don't understand that Africans don't eat noodles. Okay, all kind of sarcastic remarks were thrown at them. For 4 years, they struggled. They were losing money. The 5th year, Anthony Salim called the whole group together and said, let's call it quits and pull out Africa. Avish, Aswani and his brothers and his cousins all got together and said, no, let's do it one more year. And if that 5th year nothing happens, let's pull out. That 5th year, they broke even. And ever since then, they have been registering compounded growth. Today, the Tolerem people, Indomie controls 60 to 65, I think. 65, maybe. 65%? I was told 65% of the noodle market in Nigeria. So are you patient? The question asked is maybe not a fair question, whether I should ask whether you're patient. Do you have deep pockets to weather it out? Because you have to be there 3, 4, or even longer before you finally make a major breakthrough. So if you do have, welcome for a little adventure in Africa. If you don't have deep pockets, then better wait for a while.
Can I just? I think there is there is a way around. The way I have seen the SMEs interact while approaching Africa is with a lot of conservatism. The way I think it can work for the SMEs in Singapore is, first you need to ask, can you make a difference? Are you relevant in the chain? Then how do you go about doing that? Once you have a vision which is backed by an action, it leads to a transformation. So you need to understand what you want to achieve from Africa. A lot of time SMEs are not very clear. They look at Africa as an opportunity, just like how they would have identified the neighboring markets. But so once you have defined your vision for Africa, I think 50% of your job is done. As rightly said by Ranveer in one of the points, that you already have hubs in Africa which are providing the facilitator's role. Singapore can look at itself as a company. I mean, you can become the incubator, you can become the facilitator for the SMEs. If you see a lot of examples that was presented in the presentations today were all government to government, while we businessmen want to make money as on today. I mean, that's a fact. And there's nothing wrong in doing that. One way of doing that is basically have a hop, step and jump approach. Hop onto the ideas once your vision is very clear. Step in with a partner or a country that you have identified, could be a hub, could be a transnational like the big companies of Singapore, or it could be a company having a big operation in Africa itself. So it could be a local partner. So once you have identified your vision, that is, you have hopped on to an idea, you have stepped on with a partner, just jump into the market. The problem is that we are not ready to do those activities, and we expect the government to take the initiation for everything that we do. Government also, if you see over the years, have been not doing its role right, because there is a role for the government when it comes to being an enabler. You need to be an enabler. You need to facilitate the businessman. But when the government takes the role of the businessman, that's where things go wrong, and that's exactly what has happened in Africa. If there's a project, it is at government to government level. Okay, let me just involve my brother or my sister or my family members, and there's no process that goes down the line, which helps the businessman to come on board to take the decisions. Let's look at in contrast to what happened in Japan in 1955. Japan after the World War II had a lot of its problem. It had to develop a manufacturing base so that it can facilitate the domestic demand. What did it do? You had the big houses already there. They all came together with a concept called as, if I'm not mistaken, Sogo Shosha, that is a general trading concept. Okay, I can represent you for this product, I can represent you for this product. Let's work together. These are the same Sumitomos, they are the same Mitsui, they are the same Nippon, basically, who are today $1 billion in operation. So it's important that if you are able to have a forum over here where Singapore multinational companies are able to play the role of an enabler, the government plays the role of an enabler, I think things can work for the SMEs. One of the point also, just taking an extra time, one of the point that was mentioned in the presentation was bank to bank. It's very true. You have good banks in Africa, but do those banks have a direct test key relationship with the banks in Singapore? No way. I mean, you still need to go and pay the multinational banks across Europe, US, and probably the branch in Singapore before it comes to a DBS or a Maybank over here. Half the money is made by the banks before even you can make any money. But there is a way around. I mean, if the banks in Singapore can work with the associate banks based in Europe or US, like EcoBank, for example, in Nigeria, it's a big bank, but they also have a London branch. It's just a question of having a relationship developed with EcoBank in London with DBS over here in Singapore. See the amount of benefit that, or the savings that the company can have once you have these costs. So there are issues that you can pinpoint, but yes, there is a way that SMEs can make money. Lastly, you don't have to manufacture all the things in Singapore. I mean, half the products in fact, all the products that we do are not manufactured in Singapore, but the revenue is very much booked in Singapore. You can have value chains defined to source your products efficiently as long as it makes sense for your customer and for Singapore. End of the day, it's all about making money, and that's where I think you need to have the vision very clearly defined when you're approaching a huge market, which is Africa.
Thank you, Navin. Ma'am, you had a question? Okay, there's at the back. We'll get you next.
Hi, my name is Rajesh. I'm from Mauritius. and my company is also headquartered in Mauritius. So I just wanted to add to what Mr. Chauhan said about Mauritius. So Mauritius, as you know, what we do, we help investors set up in Mauritius to invest into Africa. So Mauritius is a point of entry and also a tax-efficient jurisdiction for Africa, given the numerous tax treaties that it's got with African countries. But what I wanted to add here is that in terms of connectivity between Southeast Asia and Africa. So just 1 month ago, there has been a launching of an air corridor, if you might be aware, between Mauritius and Africa through, between Changi Airport. In fact, the memorandum is Changi Airport and Air Mauritius. So Mauritius to access Africa and Singapore for Asia. So I believe this would enable the connectivity for investors and both ways and for tourists as well. Just an observation and yeah.
Thank you for that. Ma'am?
Thank you. Ho Gyok Chu from Human Capital Singapore. I want to congratulate SBF for organizing a very interesting talk this morning and the distinguished panel members for sharing your insights. Indeed, Ravindran, if I may call you as such, on 23rd of June, the first inaugural Internationalization Forum will be convened and to be launched by Minister for Finance Heng Swee Keat. We were also having some discussions, we're in the midst of a discussion with Ho Min Kek now with regards to SBF's participation. This forum is actually organized by Human Capital Singapore. We are a CET center, Continuing Education Training Center under WTA. We have the support of IE Singapore, SMF, and of course we're talking with the other agencies. I think the crux of it is really all about how could the big boys who actually own this big boat be taking in the rowers, which are the SMEs, to go along this journey. I think every big thing happens because it started small. And what is important is that we must kindle the spirit, nurture the passion, the curiosity, and the spirit of wanting to do things together, the big boys and the small boys coming together to make things happen. In Singapore, we are small. We have been talking about productivity growth for many years, but it never grew faster than what we would have wanted it to be. And that's because we all think of productivity more in terms of doing more and at a cheaper rate. But we never thought that you could be producing more at a cheaper rate. But if you don't have the market, you just cannot be productive. So the whole notion of productivity redefined is really about pushing the frontier, going into the overseas market, and encouraging the SMEs to go along. It's not easy. I agree with Louis, that it is not easy, but in the spirit of helping one another, I think we need the big boys to be prepared to take the small boys along. I'm not saying that the SMEs develop a crush mentality, but what I'm saying here is that when there's an opportunity, give our own local SMEs a chance to go on these big projects with the big boys. And I think the government has realized that and is taking the lead. And that's why the Skills Future Economy has internationalization as one of the 4 pillars. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Indeed. Are there any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? At the back there.
Good morning to the panel. My name is Ron Tan, PRC Global. We are in fuel efficiency. Basically, the panel commented about SME, helping SME. I think in this context, the responsibility should be tasked on IE. I don't think IE is doing enough to help the SME in Africa. As far as I know today, there's only 2 officers in Africa. One is in Accra, the other one is in Joburg, I think. So Africa being a big continent, I think one of the panel senior executive should talk to the new chairman of IE that Africa is a potential and more officers should be set up like Nairobi, Lagos, and Angola and all that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ranjan.
Thank you. I see Excellency Hazel having a difference of opinion. Yes, please.
I was sitting in the back and listening to what has happened in Ghana, we have to be fair, always. Ghana, you couldn't have made inroads into Ghana. Ghana does not even have an embassy. So if you've got a contract that's half of Ghana, the next question is, how did you go about it? How did you get it? It's got to be IE. It has to be IE. So we have to be fair.
Excellency, IE had no part in it.
Really? Okay, I rest my case.
It came from an American contact.
Thank you. I would like to again raise awareness about what SBF does. SBF is home for all the corporates in Singapore, including thousands of SMEs. And it creates these awareness forums. It invites, it hosts the visiting African delegations and dignitaries, introduces them to the SMEs here, to the community here. It also takes, I think by now it has made more than 40 trips to Africa, introduced our community to the opportunities and the countries and the conditions on ground over there. So a lot of work gets done in this manner. What I had mentioned earlier, it will be perhaps misplaced to expect the kind of effort Japan, China, India, Europe, US have put in developing their interests and the kind of support they have put for their corporates and SMEs on ground in Africa. We will have to have a different approach. I think we have this infrastructure, which we are using very well. Can we do more? Yes. And a comment related to what Mr. Tay also said and Dr. Biswas mentioned. Even today, I feel that India does not know its own stature in Africa. Dr. Biswas mentioned it is not as much as China. We do not know how underutilized is India's stature in Africa. That means how many more opportunities with the same. And I would say the same for Singapore. We have a far bigger awareness in Africa than we are utilizing today. The last comment about big boys helping SMEs. It is a business world. Nobody goes into SME to be handheld. These are business people, knowledgeable and strong at heart. None of them is there in kindergarten. Big boys play their own game and the SMEs are there for their independence and playing out their own ideas. I think they know enough about opportunities. SBF has to create these opportunities for them to be aware of a new market which is not next door for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Randy.
I am something.
Please.
Just to help you all out, let me run by some statistics for you. We went to count, actually physically count. There are 180 cities. There will be 180 cities in Africa with population more than 500,000 and above by the year 2030. First point. Second, Africa population is very, very young. If you look at Tanzania, population 49 million people, I would say that the average age of Tanzanians is 18 or 19 for males, and for females is 1 year younger, 1 year lesser. And if you get a map and you put all the median age of Africans in all the African countries, you'll notice something. A lot of them seem to be gravitating around 20 to 30 years old. So what do young people need? When they get married, they need a home. And indeed, if you look at Africa, housing shortage is very bad. It's increasing. Like the whole African continent, 15 million units shortage and ever increasing. What do young people need when they get married? They start a family, infant food, consumer durables. Commodity prices are down, we know that. Oil is affecting very badly, and copper prices collapse also. It's not good for Africa. But then there's another school of thought that Africa's development is still on track. Maybe the numbers may not be so rosy as before, but it's still on track. It's upward movement. Why? Because it's going to be driven by domestic demand for an ever-increasing population. So if you are in business, if you get all these statistics, young population, many issues with housing, not enough houses, right? many new cities because the urbanization march is on. Africa in the next a few decades will be 50% urbanized. And with all that comes businesses associated with people's needs. So if you are in that area, I think there's a strong, compelling reason to look very seriously at Africa to see how, I mean, in spite of all the challenges, how are you going to do business there, right? And you got to start now, not later, because by the time you come later, I think it's a bit too late for you. It has to be now, today.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Tain. There's Mr. Vikram Chand, the CEO from Vega Foods.
Well, it's not a question, actually. I just wanted to thank everyone on the panel from SBF on sharing their experience today, but I particularly want to just thank Naveen. You were quite articulate in the way you expect an SME to look at itself and plan itself in terms of the course of action that it needs to take to venture out of Singapore, both looking at the world from a sourcing perspective as well as an opportunity. So I think for a lot of SMEs who expect just to rely on the government, again, like Mr. Tay said and Ranveer said, we're all businessmen. And yes, we've got to take whatever opportunity we can get from the government, but at the same time, I think we need to know how to run a business, however small it is. And like the panel has just mentioned, there are many opportunities. Yes, every opportunity comes with a lot of difficulties. You know, nothing is easy. But I think if you do have a plan and you do have a vision, and like everyone said on the panel, Africa is not a short term. It's a long-term vision. And you've got to be ready to stick it out for the next 5 to 10 years. Everyone talks about Africa being the gateway. It is. It's the last gateway. But what a lot of people tend to forget, it's going to take another 3 generations before the consumers have the ability to be able to also do what the Western consumers are able to do today. So knowing that it's going to take another 2-3 generations, you've got a long road ahead, but you've got a great opportunity too. And as Mr. Tay says, if you get in now, you can sow the seeds to reap the benefits for tomorrow. But if you're just going to hop on the bandwagon tomorrow, when everyone's done the hard work, well, there's not much left for you to take. So anyhow, just to the panelists again, thank you very much for sharing your experiences.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. Ladies and gentlemen, if there are no more questions, allow me to thank the panel and the speakers, Dr. Biswas, Mr. Tay, Ranveer, Mike, and Naveen. Thank you for sharing your experience, your knowledge, and thank you for giving us your time. Time is the one non-renewable resource that there is, ladies and gentlemen. We have a finite amount of it, and I really appreciate your willingness to share that. Also, the US spectators and people that have joined us this morning, thank you very much for attending this and allowing us to share Africa with you. I am unashamedly an Afro-optimist because I come from Africa, and I do appreciate the optimism that I see here amongst senior Singaporeans such as we have here on the panel, and obviously amongst you as well. On that note, allow me also to just to give you a short heads up. We are starting next month in May with a monthly breakfast series, African Angle, where we will be sharing in a very short period of time ideas, thoughts, perspectives, experiences, lessons from prominent people in not only Singaporean society but also from Africa. The inaugural session will be held probably here at SBF, and we have the High Commissioners of South Africa, Her Excellency Ngubeni, and from Rwanda, His Excellency Kavaruganda, who will be sharing their views on the challenges and opportunities within Africa. Take note, I'm talking about the challenges and opportunities. We're not going to tell you Africa is the land of milk and honey. You only have to bring your own bee and cow. But obviously, yes, we understand. Deal with the challenges and take the opportunity. As Mr. Tay and also now Mr. Chanta said, you need to go in now. So we will be having the first one. The theme is Understanding Africa. The ambassadors speak, and I hope to see most, if not all of you over there. Thank you once again also to Eileen for your arrangements, making this thing possible today by sending it out into your network. Highly appreciated. Thank you very much.